Hello lovely people, how are you all doing today? I do hope you're doing well, hope you're happy and healthy, and I hope you're somewhere warm and snug and dry. It's chucking down yet again. Grrr, to this rain, never mind. Hopefully all the plants that are just starting to emerge will think, yay, lovely raindrops. Never mind the rain, let's talk books. I've got 3 for you today. Quite an interesting little collection. They're all very different, but of course there's a bit of a thread. There's always a thread, isn't there? So yeah, let's just jump straight in. The first one that I've read recently is An English Farmhouse by Geoffrey Grigson. This is from the Little Toller Press. Ooh, I don't know if the camera's going to be able to pick that up. Little Toller books. You've seen there's a whole, there's that end, there's a whole tranche of them. This particular run of Little Toller books, these ones with this grey spine and the picture there, these are all reprints of books that have gone out of print for whatever reason. Tastes change, don't they? So that's something to bear in mind when reading, because this was first published in 1948. Let me just quickly check. Yes, 1948. So this is post-war Britain. Geoffrey Grigson, a writer, a poet, but had done some journalism before the war. That kind of shows in here. John Piper, the artist. And who else was involved? The photographer, Percy Hennell. What an odd little book, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Oh, also to say, I don't know if it's always awkward to try and show, but there's tons of photographs. It's photographed. There are photographs throughout, but a lot of the photographs, and it's in a way it's the essence of the book too. They're really quite close up, so it's not images of the whole farmhouse. So let me give you the premise. We'll take it from the back. It's pithy and succinct. After the Second World War, the artist John Piper invited the poet Geoffrey Grigson and the photographer Percy Hennell to turn away from the horrors of the war and gaze instead at the English farmstead, not only to make a survey of agriculture in the post-war years, but to search these architectural ruins in order to understand the condition of rural England itself. So knowing the context of time is, I think it's really important for this little book. It's just a teeny tiny little thin book, because a couple of things going back to before the war, or sort of earlier into the 20th century, of course we've moved away from, and the speed with which it happens gathered apace, we're moving away from horse-powered farms to machine-powered farms, and like I said, that's gathering apace through the 20th century. Then of course we get to the war, and suddenly, you know, this country is going to starve, we can't feed ourselves, we have to plough up more of the land, we have to put more of the land to the plough, we have to grow far more than we had been doing in order to feed the nation, because all the stuff that we were normally importing, whether, you know, grain from Canada, for example, all our imports weren't getting through to this little island because all those merchant ships were being sunk by U-boats, and people were like, no, sorry, we don't want to risk coming to the UK. So of course it's post the Dig for Victory Britain that we are all pretty familiar with. Knowing that context, so it's interesting when Geoffrey is visiting, it's one particular farm. It's a real place, but he disguises where it is. He gives it a fictional name, but it's obviously somewhere down south on the Downs. I was picturing Kent in my mind, but it's talking about this one particular farmhouse, and he's sort of looking at it now, 1948, and the recent history, sort of 75 years preceding it. So here I am, 75 years later, looking at it with my even more modern eyes, made it even more interesting. Essentially, he's looking at the architecture of the farm, and in particular vernacular architecture. So in other words, vernacular architecture just means the buildings are made out of the materials which are there and at hand. So if we live in, if you're in the Cotswolds, one of the reasons people visit all the Cotswold villages is because of that beautiful Cotswold stone, that beautiful, creamy, warm, gentle stone almost. In other parts of the country, we'll see a lot of flint in a building. Do we see buildings which are, massively wattle and daub? Are we seeing slate roofs or stone roofs or thatched roofs, etc., etc.? So he's looking specifically at the vernacular architecture, and in fact, the chapters, to give you an idea, he talks first of all about the neighbourhood. That's really fascinating. So in terms of place and geography, the top of the down, the bottom of the valley, where is the farm placed? Where are the different farms placed? It depends what you're farming. Are you farming sheep? You can be a bit higher up. Is it arable? You're going to be a bit lower down. So we get a really interesting idea of the whole place. And that goes on. There's a few chapters in terms of his sort of history. It's like a modern day time team. Not a modern day. It's 1948, but they are a time team gang that have gone in to say, what can we learn about the people of this area for, say, the last 200 years? What does just looking at this architecture and its place, what do we learn about 200 years of society, of farming society in this place? So then the chapters start to get a bit more specific, and they talk about, there's one chapter on sarsen, that's a kind of rock, a chapter on building with chalk, the bricks and the brick kilns, thatch and tile, oak, galvanised metal, and then he goes into talking about trees, what trees are available, water, where's the available water, springs, ruins, inside the house, tradition, and then it's wrapping up there. So look, it's a pretty niche book. I love architecture. I find it really interesting. Let's just grab my notes. This is time team social. It's social archaeology in a way. I really enjoyed his writing. It took me a couple of beats to get in onto a roll with his style, because again, it's that thing of, it's written in 1948. People wrote differently then. You can tell that before the war, he's had a life in journalism. It's a very journalistic style, but you can also tell he's a poet. There are references to other poets and little snippets of poems throughout. But in terms of his writing style for this book, it's journalistic, it's very much an essay, it's straightforward. But it did, like I said, it took me a little while to get my head around 1948 chatting. So what did I say? So it's, in a way, the farmhouse, the particular farmhouse, it's starting to go to ruin, and that's why they want to kind of have a really good look at it before it does completely collapse. And it's almost like it's a little time capsule. What's interesting is he talks about, he wonders out loud in his writing, where will we be in 20 years, in 30 years, speculating on the state of farming, and already he's worried about biodiversity and ecology in general. He's saying, gosh, where are we going to be in 20 years? Well, here am I 75 years later. I wanted to shout to him to say, we really, really, really have messed up massively, but it seems in the recent years that we are starting to realise, hang on, hang on, what we've been doing ain't working. It might be really, really bad. So let's maybe look to the past to see what they did that was good and that worked, that we can start doing again. So yeah, it was kind of weird reading him worrying about 20 years' time, and here I am on the other side of it and thinking, yeah, we really did muck up in a couple of ways. Yeah, he did. He talks a lot about what are we, in his moment in 48, he's reflecting on what we've already lost, and then talking about in the future, what more are we going to lose? And it's very much that idea of the small farm, the small mixed farm, and how great that is for biodiversity. Yeah. Oh, I learned a couple of new words as well. Gosh, I could actually talk for ages about this book. There's so much to it. The idea as well of, and it's not just the sort of biodiversity and ecology, but things like the trades and the crafts. He's talking about how buildings, you know, we can see the hand of man and woman, but generally speaking man, the hand of man is on that building. So, you know, a hewn timber beam, carved stone, thatch that's been laid, and, you know, and sometimes lines aren't perfectly straight. There's a little bit of character, and he fears that that's all going to be lost, and we're going to end up with incredibly straight lines and all these sort of copycat buildings, the sort of modern buildings. And it's like, yeah, you're right, that's where we've gone. All the time I was reading it, I was thinking, yeah, that farmhouse is probably an Airbnb now, isn't it? Goodness me. Yeah. Anyway, I found it a really interesting read. I know it's pretty niche. I found it interesting, specifically sort of some of the architectural stuff, some of the stonework, that kind of thing. But I also found it really thought-provoking to think about all the different time, you know, when he's talking about 1875, 75 years later when it's, you know, 1948 and he's talking, and then our 75 years on again in 2024, up and down emotions of thinking, oh yeah, things do seem to speed up, but also every now and again thinking, you know what, I think we're learning again, and we're opening our eyes again to other possibilities, other ways of doing things. So that's great. But yeah, I learnt 2 new words. Got look, I've marked them for myself. Both of them I had a guess at, and both of them I kind of was there or thereabouts. But I like to look things up to get them absolutely spot on. And I love it when I learn a new word. I love a book which, as I'm reading, I think, what on earth does that word mean? And then I just put a little note. Look it up later, look it up in my dictionary, and then go back to the sentence or paragraph to read it in context to really understand it. But one of the words was autochthonous. So when I'm learning new words, that's how it's spelt. But I also write words down phonetically so that I know how it's pronounced. So autochthonous, which is AUTO, auto, CHTHONOUS, autochthonous. And it means, very specifically, it means a plant, animal or substance naturally occurring in a particular ecological region, autochthonous. But it's also used in a more general way to describe native or indigenous. So that plant is native to the region, that rock is indigenous to that area. But yeah, it's to a particular ecological area or region. So yeah, autochthonous. It's the auto that made me think, oh, it's, yeah. And then the other one, Boeotian, B-O-E-O, that's going to make us think classical Greece, isn't it? Tian, Boeotian. Relating to Boeotia, which was a region in ancient Greece. So that kind of, it's Boeotian, it's ancient Greece, it's that region. And that bit was like, yeah, okay, I know that. But why is he talking about it? And he was describing the interiors of some of these really humble sort of farm dwellings, and also the dwellings of other villagers further down the valley in the villages, so the smithy and that sort of thing. So it just literally means dull and without cultural refinement. So it can even mean Philistine. So one might think of, I don't think it's a word I'll use because I think it's quite insulting, dull without cultural refinement. But he's talking about workers' cottages being homely, comely and Boeotian. Dull. So in classical Greece, the Boeotia, that area, people were considered to be a bit, sort of dim-witted. New words. Anyway, look, sorry, gosh, I've gone on too long about this book already. Let's just wrap up. Essentially, it's a book about the anatomy of a farmhouse in terms of the building materials, but it's about so much more than that. It's about place. Why did that farm first grow out of that place? It's about the idea of the organic growth of farms, villages, hamlets, and how maybe in more modern times we've lost that kind of organic growth of things and we impose instead. It's about the beauty of this skill of all those different trades and crafts that went into building a house, a farm, a barn. There's a feeling of nostalgia from his 1948 eyes of what have we lost, what are we going to lose in the future. It's an interesting read to read as a 21st century woman reading his views, and all the time I sort of kept reminding myself they are just out of the war. How does that kind of influence how he's feeling and seeing things? So yeah, lovely read. I really enjoyed it. I don't know that it's going to be to everyone's taste. I don't know that it's going to be to anyone's taste. It is pretty niche. Right, I've spent too long on that. Right, let's rattle through the next couple. Because this is I think this will appeal to a lot of you. This is The Bumblebee Flies Anyway by Kate Bradbury. Some of you may know her writing. She's a garden writer and she writes very much about wildlife gardening. In a nutshell, so the subtitle is A Memoir of Love, Loss and Muddy Hands. I don't think we're going to have time for that. Well, I'll check, hang on. A Memoir of Love, Loss and Muddy Hands. Kate has a relationship breakup and because of that moves and has to buy a new flat. Now, we all know, when you're buying a flat, when there are two of you buying a place, so she's with her partner up in London, and when they break up, she can't afford up in London, so she goes a bit further out. She ends up in a flat in Hove, which is just along the coast from Brighton. And it's all about her making a new garden. So that's it in a nutshell, in its most simple. But of course it's not about her just making a new garden, is it? It's about her making her way now. She's single. How does she get over the heartache? Myriad other emotional things going on. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's her making a garden, but it's for her, it's all about the wildlife. So every plant has got to, yes, it's for her to enjoy, but it's got to be for the wildlife to enjoy. I was thinking I should be taking notes as I'm reading this, notes specifically about the plants, because I was thinking when I move, so you can imagine she's moved into a new flat. It's it's like a basement, lower basement with the garden. I was thinking, oh, it's going to be me. It's going to be me soon, I hope. And all the different names of the plants that she was mentioning, because they are specifically all about the critters. So initially, when we start reading it, it's very much, this is someone who... It didn't feel like too much like it was going to be one of those dreadful redemption books. It's like, it seems that so many under 30s or under 35s, I think she's about 34, around the 30-year-old writers, when they're writing about nature, there's got to be some kind of like sob story, redemption, I healed. Oh, it's not too much like that, because, well, I would tell you. But yeah, so initially it's very much... It feels like quite a straightforward book about, she's building a new garden. And with that very, very specific task of bringing the wildlife in. So I was learning. So I'm enjoying the read and I'm learning. And what's lovely, she mentions quite early on how the garden she inherits, or she buys, she buys this flat, there's nothing in it. It's been decked over, the entire garden. Oh, as so many gardens are. But next door there's a buddleia, and on the other next door, what is it? I've forgotten already. I think it's a holly bush. And there's a little gang of sparrows live in the buddleia. And so she can hear them chatting, and she's like, I just want them to come into my garden. I'm desperate. So this is all about bringing wildlife back into her garden, and that's going to just make her heart fill up and burst with joy. She does all the clearing work. Now she doesn't have much money, so this is all about, grabbing cuttings from friends and, free cycling a greenhouse, all these kind of things. So I was like, yeah, this is so me. And what's lovely, I made a note of it. There's this wonderful bit, it's quite early on in the book, page 56. She's cleared all the decking. Great. And then there's that, this weed membrane down her, like, clear that. And she's starting to fork the ground over, get out as much rubble and rubbish and dirt as she can. And then one day a robin appears on the fence, and then, of course, as robins love to hang around when we're gardening, don't they? Because every time we stick a fork in the ground, we might be revealing a worm. They'll dart down, grab that worm, and off they go. And she describes the moment when that's it. She's going to plant an apple tree. So she's been digging a hole and she's left the spade there. And the robin flits down and lands on the handle of her spade. Obviously, it's going to go and dart down into the hole that's been dug to put the apple tree into. And she just says, it's very simple. She says, my robin. That's her sentence. My robin. In my garden, my heart soars. I stand rooted to the spot, watching her. And then she carries on working, but lets the robin have its fun on the spoil heap of soil that's been taken out from the apple tree hole. The robin can peck away there to its heart's content. I loved that moment, and I so identified with it, and that's why I think a load of you would like this book too and will identify with it. That moment, it's so precious, isn't it? When an animal, whether it's a bird, a butterfly, a fox, a hedgehog, when they choose your garden to be in, it's such a precious, special moment, isn't it, when you realise that you're sharing your garden. And isn't that what we all want? I want to share my garden. I want to make my garden as attractive as possible to as many different beings as possible. I want them all to come in. Come. So I love that. And I identified with it, and I'm sure so many of you will as well. So that's kind of like the tone of the book, but then towards the end it changes. I would say about the last third. Her mum gets ill, and her mum is over, I think she's towards Gloucester, I think. You know, is it a stroke? What's happened? So her mum is seriously ill. So yeah, I'll let you know about that, because that's a little bit tough. It's a bit of a tough one. So she's sort of just, you know, there's all sorts of feelings of guilt and, you know, wanting to be there. Does she neglect her garden? All that. Her mum gets, I would just say that the mum gets well enough to come home. So no jeopardy there. I'm not spoiling anything for you there. But yeah, it's so the mum does recover enough to go home, and it made me think this book is so much. It is a book about recovery. It's a book about, you know, the recovery of her broken heart from the breakup with her long-term partner, the recovery of that garden, and of gardens in general, and of wild spaces in general, the recovery from this sterile, uninviting place to something that's beautiful, that creatures want to come. But also, so yeah, it's a book about discovery, but it's also a book about recovery, but it's also a book about destruction. At one point, I was mentioning the sparrows that are in the buddleia and the holly bush. I shouldn't go into too much detail, I want you to read it, but at one point the sparrows disappear and she's heartbroken, and I could feel that. I get off emotional thinking about it now. So it's a book, very much it's her personal recovery, but it feels like this is a book about, once again, it's because it's what I read, it's about, you know, recovering our green spaces, recovering our joy of nature and our respect for nature, and perhaps, you know, just helping it along a little bit. I flew through, I mean, it's a shortish book. I absolutely flew through it, thoroughly enjoyed it. I should have made a note of all the plants as I went along that she was mentioning in terms of for her wildlife garden, but this book becomes about so much more than just her making a new garden. It's a kind of, in a way, it's a call to arms to us all to just think a little bit more about, can we plant something, and what are we planting? Is that plant going to make me happy, but also is it going to make another soul happy? Yeah, so let's re-green our lives, yay, and, you know, recover something that we've lost in ourselves, maybe, of that simple joy of a dandelion appearing in the crack of a pavement and everyone's hurrying by and not noticing, but let's maybe we all stop and notice it and take joy in that audacious, vibrant, bright yellow, and yay, celebrate a little dandelion. Now that brings me on to, gosh, I wonder if we've got time. Okay, really quickly, because otherwise it's going to be so long. The most recent read is Timeless Simplicity by John Lane. Loved this. Again, a really skinny book, about 100 pages. This is more like an essay. Creative living in a consumer society. Gosh, so it's going to be so hard to talk about this. This book was incredibly thought-provoking. I've scribbled millions and millions and millions of notes. Only one to share here, because I thought, actually, this is really important stuff. I do want to share another point, because it touches on my frugality. Why am I frugal? And it's not about getting the cheapest deal all the time. It's not about money. It's about eschewing consumerism. And that's essentially what this little book is about. A little book, but it's full of big, big thoughts. This book is kind of, as I've written at the top there, it's sort of philosophical, it's spiritual, it's political. It's not a how-to. It's not a how to live simply, although he does go into that towards the end of the book. It's all about the notion of what he calls voluntary simplicity, as in, yes, frugality comes into that, not really spending, but it goes so much deeper than that. It's about being at peace with who you are and what you've got, enjoying what you've got, enjoying less, focusing on other things that are nothing to do with money, that are nothing to do with wealth and status. So focusing on spending time with friends, focusing on taking time to enjoy a sunrise or a sunset, to enjoy a really beautiful meal with friends. But it's simple food cooked with love and eaten slowly. It's kind of like slow movement stuff as well. Having time or sort of making time and prioritizing time for one's own creativity. So yeah, it's almost a sort of get out of the rat race, wake up, smell the coffee, smell the roses, or whatever it is. Get out of the rat race, do your own thing. You know, I think it's the kind of book that would appeal if you have half a mind that you want to live off grid. I think you'd like this book. If you have half a mind that you can't be doing with adverts and shopping and all that anymore, this book will appeal. Or it's all about doing with so much less, but being so much richer for it. So for instance, the description on the back, this book is about simplicity, not destitution, not parsimoniousness, not self-denial, but the restoration of wealth in the midst of an affluence in which we are starving the spirit. In other words, I am wealthy in spirit, I am wealthy in joy, I am wealthy in appreciation. Yeah, I don't have much money, but actually I don't care, because it's not, life isn't about money and wealth and having a show-off home and a show-off car and having all the latest in, the latest holiday fad destinations and the latest gadgets and this. Shock it all. Live simply, focus on what's really, truly important, and that's the spirit, our soul, that the beauty, the joy that's all around us, but do we ever have time to see it? So in a way, it's like I was just saying about Kate's book, the joy of the colour of a dandelion. I mean, the colour of a dandelion is so ridiculously cheerful. And it's growing out of a crack, it's hanging on, it's determined to grow. But how often do we stop and just actually notice it or really appreciate it for that gloriousness of its colour? So that's essentially what this book is about. The first couple of chapters talk a little bit about the history of, over the years, so he talks about different religions as well, and various hermits and monks and aesthetes over the years who have withdrawn from society and lived with nothing but found great peace and great wealth of spirit. Slightly more modern takes on that as well, because yes, some of us do have to work because we've got bills to pay, but how can we find work that fulfills us? How to get out of work if it doesn't fulfill us? He talks a little bit about the obstacles to the obstacles which we all face when we are trying to simplify our lives and live a more simple life. And actually just going into that idea of what is simplicity anyway, where, because I mean, actually he mentions it in the book at one point. It says just because you've left your job and you're living this simple life doesn't mean that it's not hard work or that you won't be working for hours and hours. Because yes, you might be out in the yard chopping wood all day for your fuel for the next week, and it might be really hard, muscle aching work all day, but the joy of that work, the satisfaction of that work, because you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your family, you're doing it without anybody's eyes on you, without, anyone supervising you and criticizing you or judging you for it. You are just completely in the moment, engaged in your hard work. So yeah, a simple life doesn't necessarily mean an easy life where you get to lounge around reading books all day. I wish. But it's a satisfying life, a really, really satisfying life. I want to talk a little bit more, go a bit more deeply into this book in a separate video, not specifically about the book, but about, because I'm coming up for my 7-year anniversary, and I thought, actually, this is kind of perfect, because over the years, people say, oh, I love it when you do your frugal stuff, and can you do frugal stuff on this, that, and the other? And I think, oh, no, but that's not why I'm frugal. That's not what my frugality is about. And that would be my own fault for not communicating better. But yeah, so I think we'll dive into this a bit more. Suddenly feeling a bit chilly. I was moving around earlier and I was nice and warm. Anyway, I think it's a cracker of a book. Really thought-provoking. And like I say, because at times it is a bit political, small p. There is that sense of responsibility of the individual on the planet. So if you're even vaguely interested in any of that sort of thing, I think you would get a kick from this book. Yeah, give it a go. But I think of today's books, notes flying. I've hardly looked at the notes. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I appreciate it's a little bit niche and it's maybe not for everyone. But yeah, I think if you like Time Team, you might like this book. Timeless simplicity, challenging in a really, really good way. Challenging, thought-provoking, not so much a manual of how to live simply, but a manual to get you thinking about, well, maybe it would be a good idea to live a bit more simply. Yeah, get those cogs turning. Really recommend it. And then the Kate Bradbury, The Bumblebee Flies Anyway. Sweet little book, quick book to read. A little bit emotional at times. Enjoyed it for that. But also, for me, on a totally personal, self-indulgent level, I really enjoyed it because a lot of the time I was thinking, oh, this is going to be me soon, making a new garden and hopefully, inviting those robins and those sparrows and all the other little critters into my future garden. So yeah, I think a lot of you would enjoy it and get something out of it. So there we go. That's this week's 3 books. Eclectic as always. Of all of them, that's definitely been, thought-provoking. The most thought-provoking. Right, I am getting really chilly. I think it's because it's so wet today and it's getting darker and darker by the minute. I think I need to put some extra layers on. I've just got my shawl just very loosely around my shoulders. It's not enough. I need more. All right, lovelies. I will see you again really soon, I hope. I'm not sure what the next... Not with the books. I'm not sure what we're doing next. Oh, yes, some freebies and bits next. So I will see you when I next see you. But until then, happy reading. Stay cozy because, we had that one really sunny day and it's like, oh, it's spring. No, it's not spring. It's not spring. Yeah, it's still chilly and damp. So it's still perfect for cozying up and doing some gentle reading or some really thought-provoking reading. Until the next time, cheerio.